Hey fellas, welcome to another exciting series here at Prime Model Works headquarters. And I'm taking a brief hiatus from building late war German jets, and I decided to pick something out of my stash to build that I bought about 4 years ago before I knew better. And it is the famous Airfix 124 scale P-51 Mustang. Now this was first molded back in 1973, so it's an old kit. And this is the first Airfix kit that I've ever built. You know, and being an old kit, you expect a lot of fit issues, and I don't know, some of the molding wasn't very good. But after about a week and a half's worth of work, I've got it up to about this stage. Now, I've just got these taped together, nothing's glued. But just getting the outside details and stuff taken care of, because I am going to put this, give it the old Prime Model Works treatment, and put it in flight on a display base, I'm closing everything up. So you can see there were a lot of issues with closing up the gear bay and closing up the gun bay doors and just all that little stuff, and trying to get it all squared away so I can start painting the inside and the pilot and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna take you through and show you. Some of it may be kind of boring to some of you guys that have been modeling for a while, but some of the newer viewers might find some of my techniques here interesting. And you know, I'm not going to go overboard in trying to make this completely accurate. That's kind of not my bag. I'm not really into, you know, being real specific with accuracy, but I do want it to look cool and you know, be somewhat accurate. I want somebody to, you know, when I have it on my display base, somebody to come up and say, well, that's a P-51 Mustang, and not say, hey, that's a P-40 Warthog or something. So anyway, I'll take you through and show you what I've done to get to this point. In the next video, I'll go, we'll get to painting the inside, getting it together, and then taking care of issues as they come along. So hope you enjoy the video. So let's take a look at the upper part of the wings. Now I've already started working on them. Now the only rivet detail that they had on here were along the flaps here, and I went ahead and sanded those off. They didn't have any rivet detail on the upper part. And from what I understand, they had puttied up all the rivets and I guess what they could of the panel lines on the wings to improve the airflow. Now I am going to put the panel lines back. I just think it looks better. Whether or not they were puttied, I don't know. There's a big debate online about it. I have no idea, and I don't really care. I just want it to look cool. Whether or not it's completely accurate, you know, I'm not going to like break my back over trying to make a completely accurate kit out of this thing. So, but what I've done is I've went ahead and I've glued the 3 gun bay doors in. You've got this long piece here and then a couple shorter ones, and they fit like crap. They just look nasty. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to fill in all these panel lines, at least right here. I'm going to leave the panel lines along the leading edge because I think those will be a little harder to replicate than what I've got here, and they don't actually look too bad. So I've got them put in there. I filled it in, and with my CA glue and metallic pigment. And if you're new to my videos, this is my favorite filler of choice. I do have a video out there called my seam line filler of choice or something like that. But I use it a lot in my videos, just mixing CA glue and gunmetal pigment there. And it's my favorite filler. So I went ahead and I filled in these panel lines. And this one I'm working on, and I'll show you how I'm doing this. So I've got this filled in with my CA glue and metallic pigment. And I'm going to take a file, and I'm just going to go over and knock down most of my filler first. With the file. And I'm going to create scratches, but that's okay because I'm going to take those out. But the reason I'm using a file instead of just sanding it is because it's quicker, one, and it's quicker. It's less work. So the less work, the better. And the way the wing is concaved or convexed, you can just get that one point and not totally sand down and distort the plastic here. So I'm just taking my file and knocking off the high spots of my filler. Just like so. And you don't have to press too hard. Let the file do the work. And it always helps to clean out the greeblies of your file, and I just rub it on my pants. You can rub it on your arm or whatever. But keep your file clean and it cuts a lot better. Still got some high spots right here. And I will probably need to fill in a little bit more right there. It doesn't look like it got filled in very well. Still a little bit of a seam. And looks like there might be a little bit of a seam here as well. So I'll come back after I file this down, add a little bit more, and then rinse and repeat. So that's all I'm doing with this. And then once I get these all filled in, I'll come in with my Infinity sanding sticks. I'll start at a 220, and then I'll come along and I'll start sanding out my scratches and smoothing everything down with the 220. Then I'll come in with the 400, 600, 800, and then the 1000 grit. And then I'll end up with something like this, which is really smooth, and the camera probably won't pick it up, but it's really smooth, and this will be ready to be primed. Now once I prime it, then I'm gonna put in my, replace these panel lines here that I wanna replace over top of my primer, which I found works the best. So now that I've got my wing panel lines taken care of, and again, I did leave these up here because I think they'll look okay. I'm going to use these as a reference point to mark out where I'm going to replace the panel lines once I get it primed. And how I'm going to do this is I'm just going to take out my handy dandy calipers here. And I'm going to take from my reference point, which is going to be this panel line right here. I'm just going to measure where it should go. And it should be, and you know, you don't have to be exact. We're going to get as close as we can. So 2748. So I'm just going to mark on the wing itself 27.48. And it's all going to be in millimeters, okay? I'm going to come down here on this side, and again, using this as a reference point, I'm going to mark it out. It looks like 1424. And then for this one right here, I'm going to use this panel line as a reference. And we'll come over here and measure it. Looks like 46.80. All right, now I've got this marked out, and what I'll do is I'll take a picture of it on my phone, so then I have this as a reference, because once I spray it with primer, I'm not gonna be able to see any of this, but and they should be the same for both wings, so I don't really need to measure this one out. But then I can go ahead and put in these two panel lines here. Once I prime it, I'll know the measurements. And for the bay door, the gun bay doors, what I've done is I've cut out a little piece of paper, a template, that once I get this line right here and this line right here, I can just put this in, and then I can trace it out and then scribe in the panel lines for the bay doors. And then for this other wing, all I have to do is flip it over. And I can do the same thing on this side. So then I'll be able to replicate the panel lines the way they were on the kit initially. And we should be good to go with that. So let's take a look at the bottom wings. Now, I went ahead and I put the wheel bay doors in, and you can see it's a mess. They weren't meant to be closed. And it's funny because I had a guy one time, I might have mentioned this before, but I had one guy comment on one of my videos that the only reason that I put the landing gear up in a lot of my planes is because I'm lazy and don't want to mess with the landing gear. Well, he's an absolute moron. This is going to cause me a lot more work than if I would just put it on the landing gear. But I want it up, and so that's the way we're going to do it. And I'm going to have to deal with the consequences of doing so on an old kit. Now, there are a couple different ways to handle this. Now, for something like this, what I like to do is I like to take some plastic card, and I've got some of various thicknesses here. And I don't really know what the actual thickness of this one is, but it fits. So I'll just cut out strips, and I'm going to put it in here just like so to fill this gap, and then I can glue it in. And then once it dries, I can come in and I can shave it off and sand it. I will have to use some of my filler, which I'm going to fill in most of this anyway and just redo the panel lines. But this will give it some more support and make these doors a lot sturdier. So if I go and do some heavy sanding, I don't have to worry about pushing them through, because there's not a whole lot of area in here to grip the plastic. So it's potentially, if I do put a lot of pressure on here, I can push them through and then cause myself a lot of problems. So in areas like this is the way I like to solve it. So I'll just put in my little strip of plastic card here. Make sure it's nice and snug. And then come in and glue it. Come in from the other side and glue it as well. I can also use some sprue goo. And when I glued these in, I did take some sprue goo and spread it along some of these joints just to stiffen it up. Now, go ahead and get some of this just to show you what it's like. I think I've shown sprue goo before, but a lot of other modelers use it. A lot of other guys like to use it as their filler. I'm not a big fan of it as a filler per se. Basically, what I use sprue goo for is to stiffen joints like this. Basically just a thick glue. Now, what sprue goo is cut pieces of sprue from a kit. I think this is Hasegawa sprue, if I'm not mistaken, mixed with some Tamiya extra thin. And what it does is it just melts the plastic and gives you this thick kind of goopy melted plastic substance. And when it hardens, it's basically hardened plastic. Now, the reason I don't like to use this per se as a filler is because I always get these little bubbles in it, and when I go to rescribe, you cut through the bubbles and it just makes a mess. I don't know if there's something I'm doing wrong with it or what, but so I don't typically use it as a filler, and it takes a long time to dry. And with my CA glue metallic pigment, it dries instantaneously, and then I can fill it and sand it within 5 minutes. And then for this little piece right here, I'm just going to take another little piece of plastic card and shove it in here. And then do the same thing. Like so. And what I'm going to do for these areas right here is I'm going to take some plastic card. I'm just going to cut out a strip. And I'm going to smear this area with sprue goo. Maybe even wet it down a little bit more with some Tamiya Extra Thin. I'm going to take this thin piece of plastic card and I'm going to cover this area up. Okay. So then what I can do is when I go to fill this in, I'll just take my CA metallic pigment, fill in that area, sand it all smooth, and then mark out just like I did with the wings on where I want my panel lines. It's going to be difficult because I've got a bunch of different like curves and stuff. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to scribe these in, but I should be able to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this same thing on the other side. And then once all this dries, I'll sand it all flush. I'll fill it in with my CA and metallic pigment, and then we'll come back in once I prime and rescribe those in. So let's take a look at the fuselage halves. Now, one of the big issues that I initially ran into was fitting the engine cowl pieces, which come in two, top and a bottom piece. They fit in here, they glue into this little frame. I guess you could have it open, but they were molded really poorly and they didn't fit very well. So I've cleaned that up. I've filled in that seam and cleaned it up a little bit. And then you can also see the raised detail on all the rivets. And I'm going to go ahead and take some sandpaper and get rid of all those. And I'm going to come back in and I'm just going to redo all the panel lines on the fuselage. You can see here I've already got a good start. I've got most of the panel lines filled. There's a little bit more work I need to do up here. And some of this I'll be able to take care of. I will wait to take care of once I get the fuselage halves together. Because when I get them together, I'm sure there are going to be issues with fitment. And I'll have to clean up the seam along the top and then along the top here, the engine cowl as well. But I wanted to get a good start on it so I could get most of the work done before I fit them together. So basically, I'm just going to take some sandpaper and I'm just going to, it's going to take a while because there's a lot of these rivets. And yeah, that's all there is to it. I'm just going to sand these off. And there are some raised panels like right here. I think I'm going to remove. I removed some back here. And I can replace those with either scribing them in or replacing them with some plastic card, which I'll have to look at some pictures and see actually if those protrude beyond the other panels, like they have them detailed in the kit with this raised detail. So one other thing that I did is I drilled out all the holes. There's these vents and they were just molded in. There wasn't any holes. So I drilled out all the holes in the vents and then I sanded the raised part flush. And I'll come back in when I rescribe my panel lines. I'll scribe in to make it look like an actual panel that's riveted in place. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to get to sanding and filling these panel lines, and hopefully my other stuff will dry and I'll get to work on the bottom of the wing. So let's take a look at my progress. And as you can see, I've got it mocked up. Ooh, it hit my camera. But I've got it mocked up, and it doesn't fit overall as bad as I thought it would. As bad as I thought it would. Now I've got the landing gear all smoothed out, the landing gear bay doors, and hopefully once I get primer on those, it'll look okay. I do have the wings glued together. I didn't install any guns. I will figure that out after I get all the wings taken care of. Since I'm closing everything up, there was no need to put all that crap inside the wings. So I've got that taken care of. And what I'm working on now is the rudders and the flaps and that kind of stuff. So the tail rudder comes in. It was real coarsely molded plastic. They were trying to mimic the fabric, I guess, but they didn't have these like pieces of tape or these ribs that you see in most of the pictures. So how I'm doing that is I'm taking some real thin plastic card. It's like paper thin, and I'm cutting real thin strips of it. And there's my daughter Kylie. You want to say hi, Kylie? No? You shy? Are you shy? So I'm just cutting real thin strips. Just like so. Like that. And I've already got it marked out where I want to put these. So I'll take some of my thin strips of plastic card and I'll put it on here and I'll measure it out. So, then I can go ahead and cut it. All right. And since it's kind of bowed, I'm going to go ahead and flip this around. Darn it. And Ringo's in here too, guys, so I've got an audience. My daughter Kylie wants to start a YouTube channel. No, I don't. Oh, well then why are you in here bugging me on mine? Oh, brat. So, oh, it gets kind of finicky. Let me throw some Tamiya extra thin down on this. Just come in here and manipulate it and move it with the tip of my X-Acto blade. Kind of push it down. And then once this dries, I can come in here and sand it down a little bit, especially towards the edges here. Where in the pictures it looks like it kind of smooths down. From what I understand, this is tape that they put on here. Some kind of like a reinforcement tape, maybe. But that is all there is to this. Okay. And we'll do the same thing. When you cut these thin strips of plastic card, it bends a little bit. So I'm just using that to my advantage here on the contour of this rudder. What you eating, Ringo? What's he eating, Callie? It's like so. What are you eating? Don't be eating my model. All right, I'm gonna get this done and see you in a bit. So after this has had a chance to dry for a couple days, what I'm gonna do now is take a rounded scalpel like I've got here, and I'm going to trim down the edges of my ribs. And I am gonna sand these, but this is just gonna make things a lot quicker when I go to sand it, because I want the middle of these ribs to stick up a little bit more than the edges. So I'm just coming in here and shaving down, making it flush with the rest of the rudder. Just like so. I've already done these top ones and I've already finished up on the back side here with everything that I'm going to do to this. Now, it's my understanding this was fabric. Ew. A little overboard on that one, but that's okay. So what we're going to do, after we get this done, is I'm going to take my rounded scalpel and I'm just going to start shaving some of this material away to give it more of a three-dimensional look, like this is fabric draped over this framing. I'm just going to come in here in the center and I'm going to concentrate in the center and I'm just going to start scraping. And you can see I'm just taking off a little bit at a time, but it doesn't take long to start making a wavy type look in the plastic. See all my shavings there? I'm just going to go along and do this all the way down. in the middle of each one of these ribs. Just like so. Now, once I get all those shaved the way I like them, I'm just going to take a sanding stick like this, and I'm going to go along and smooth out any of those lines. It's almost like you would brush marks without using a brush. It's scalpel marks. This is kind of crappy. One thing I like about these little thin sanding sticks is once you wear the end of it off, you can just cut it and then start using the rest of it. So I'm just going to sand out all those lines, just like so. And it doesn't take much. This Airfix plastic is really soft. Okay. Then once I get done with that, I'm going to take my Infinity sanding sticks, and we'll start with a 600. And I'm going to start sanding my ribs down. And I'm going to concentrate on sanding the edges here. Just like so. And I'm going to sand them. I don't want to sand them completely flush. I do want a little bit to stick up. But with these sanding sponges, because they have a lot of cushion, it's going to get in there and it's going to smooth everything out and kind of blend everything in. And then once I throw a coat of primer on here, everything should look pretty uniform, like these were molded into the plastic. So that's basically all there is to this. And now I can feel this, and I can feel some of the little divots. It's going to be kind of hard to pick up on camera, but you can see the way it kind of goes in a concave shape and then comes back up where the rib is. And it feels really smooth. It feels nice. So I'm going to get on with this and see you in a bit. All right, one last look before we close out this episode. In the next episode, I will start painting and putting it together. Hopefully I can get the everything painted in the cockpit and put this together. I'm going to have an issue right up here. I've already tried to test fit the front windshield, and I'm going to have a lot of fitting to do on it. So apparently that's going to be an issue. One other thing that I've read online is that the dihedral is really flat. So I've already tried to start taking care of that issue. Now, if you glue it together the way the kit would have you do it, that's what it would look like, okay? So what I've done is I've taken my Dremel tool and I've shaved off a hair right along, starting at right about here on each side of the fuselage, and I've shaved that off and sanded it. And it cut just enough to where when I glue this down, I can glue the bottom in. And then you can see I've got quite a bit of gap up here along the wing root. So once I glue those down, then I can just push the wings up. It's going to be kind of hard to do with it not all glued together. But if I push those up, now it's going to take care of most of that seam, and it's going to give me a better dihedral. And it's kind of hard to show you, but it is going to lift those wings up a little bit. I think it's going to be more accurate. If you do it too much, then you're going to run the risk of cracking and breaking something along the bottom because this plastic is fairly thin. So I think that's going to help. It's going to make it look a little bit better, a little more accurate maybe. And so that's all we've got here. Like I said, we'll start the next episode with painting the pilot, the cockpit, the parts of the inside of the fuselage here, and then I'll get it glued together and hopefully get this thing in primer by the end of the next episode. Thanks for watching, fellas.